Hello and happy holidays. Welcome inside UNBC's beautiful Wood Innovation and Design Center right downtown Prince George. I'm Jesse McGowan with CKPG News, and thank you so much for joining us for our 2019 year in review as we take a look back at the biggest news stories in Prince George over the last 365 days. Now, 2019 was a year of up and down here in Prince George, and you'll see that within our first story. January 7th. Nearly 35 protesters braved the cold outside the Prince George Courthouse, standing in solidarity against the fight of the LNG pipeline. Similar rallies were held across the nation.
The sounds of protesters' drums could be heard in front of the Prince George Law Courts. One of the attending protesters says rallies like this one in downtown Prince George are being echoed in some cities around the world.
You'll find out that there's 55 plus rallies happening across Canada and around the world right now, even as far as what do we have here? Atlanta, Bellingham, Flagstaff, Milan, Minnesota, New York City, Oldham Territory, San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington were the last ones that we were aware of.
People started to gather around 8 in the morning to voice their support for the Wet'suwet'en Nation, who are battling against the construction of a gas pipeline.
They have not given permission, consent to industry or the government to invade, and so we're here to support them and their allies who are out on the ground and those who've been detained during the invasion of the Gidimt'en checkpoint, and hopefully right now, as they're out there on the territory defending the land, the water, and our people and our land and our culture and our governance system, hoping for our spirits to lift them up.
Protesters marched from the law courts through downtown to spread their message of opposition against the court injunction that grants GasLink the rights to perform construction.
It's really important for us to stand together and to bring unity within this process. It's important for reconciliation. It's important for moving ahead and preserving our culture and our traditional ways of living within our traditional lands and territories. And this is what we're doing. This is what we're here for. And this is what we fight for. I'm here because I'm doing that for the future of my kids and the future generations. And this is all we have.
For some protesters, Tuesday's rally is precedent-setting.
We are asserting our rights, and a lot of nations have tried to do this in the past, and I think we're getting more ground. There's more awareness in the world, and I think people are starting to understand our perspectives and realize that they are on unceded traditional territories that they need to be respectful of, just as you would when you walk into anybody's house, and be respectful of those people who own that land and that house.
The very next week, North District RCMP launched their first homicide investigation of the year after the body of a 40-year-old man was discovered near Westlake.
That same day, the Prince George RCMP received a report of a person lying in the ditch along Westlake Estates Road off the Blackwater Road. When police officers attended, they located a deceased man in the ditch. The RCMP North District Major Crime Unit was called in and now has conducted this investigation.
January also saw Prince George approve its first retail cannabis store, 4 months after it became legal in Canada.
The former RBC building in the Westgate Plaza will likely be home to Prince George's first cannabis retail store. Council has approved the first 2 readings of a rezoning application submitted by the Liquor Distribution Branch. The province cited a trio of reasons for choosing that location. The building is located in a large retail complex and is consistent with the nature of the area. It's easily accessible and it's not expected to adversely impact traffic. When the news first came to light, some were wondering about that location.
It's not necessarily up to us. As I've said for a very long time, if a developer or an investor comes to our community, they will look at the community and they will make a decision as to where they want to relocate and then go through the proper procedures. And that is what's happened in this case. They've identified a location that they think will work for them. So now they're going through the process.
Jeannie Burnett with Zaga's Hemp Shop was stunned when she heard the news, saying she has had her application into the province for several months.
I was recommended by the city before the LCRB was. They were recommended about 3 weeks after me, but because they don't have to go through all the footwork, they just push themselves through.
She suspects the province has put off dealing with those private applications until this one went through, and she feels sorry for those who have put in applications but don't have an existing business like she does. But for the city, there remains one big question of cannabis revenue sharing.
We absolutely don't know, and it is high on our radar. It's at the top of the list when it comes to us looking at licensing and going through the process for cannabis stores, retail stores in our city. I've said for a very long time that it is going to cost us money in various areas. So how do we cover that off?
It's expected the rezoning application will be back before Council on February 4th for a public hearing.
I think what we're going to see is some strong turnout from the public, I would suspect. And the reason being is that, as you've mentioned, it's the first one. It's the first one that we as a city are going to entertain. And I think whenever we see that, there's usually strong turnout. They're going to want to hear from council. They want to hear our position on it. So I anticipate it'll be a busy public hearing.
This will be only the second government-run cannabis retail store in BC, with the first in Kamloops.
As the first month of the year came to an end, residents living near Campbell Avenue dealt with a stubborn visitor. A moose on the loose was cause for concern.
Residents on Campbell Avenue and the surrounding area have been seeing the cow with young calves in tow for several days now. Lariah Sanchez owns a daycare on the street and says while the moose mostly minds its own business eating, it can be aggressive and has even charged her dog.
She walked over to the fence and barked, and I didn't realize the moose was right at the fence. And the female moose had reared up and was trying to come over the fence, and her front feet were actually on top of my fence, and I thought the fence was coming over. I thought she was coming through.
Moose can be aggressive animals, and Leland Clausen, a conservation officer, says that people walking with their dogs in the area can make an encounter worse and recommends people keep control of their pets.
Moose obviously have natural predators. Some of those predators are canines or dogs. And a moose doesn't know how to tell the difference between a wild dog and a domestic dog. So if you're walking around your neighborhood, taking your dog for a walk, it's very important to have them on a leash.
During the winter, moose are generally seen at lower elevations with less snow. The lower snow level means easier travel and a greater abundance of food. And as temperatures rise, the family of moose could move on.
With this family unit, I mean, they'll spend the winters kind of at lower elevations. Once the snow melts, they usually follow the receding snow line further up back to higher elevations and follow the new growth as spring progresses.
The moose may eventually move on as the snow melts, but if you're planning to walk your dog or spend time outside, Clausen recommends that you keep your eyes open, pay attention when you're enjoying the outdoors, and if you do encounter an animal, to move away from that animal.
Into February now, where we welcomed the world. It was the moment organizers and the city had been waiting for, as Prince George hosted its first international competition in the World Paranordic Skiing Championships.
The first athlete out here today in this 10K event.
The biathlon races kicked off the long-awaited start of the World Paranordic Skiing Championships at the Caledonian Nordic Ski Club. The first race of the day was the men's middle-sitting biathlon. It was in this race that Canada would win their first medal, a silver by Colin Cameron, who hails from Sudbury, Ontario. The next Canadians to race were Mark Arends and Kyle Barber in the men's standing biathlon, followed by Emily Young and Brittany Hudak in the women's standing. Support for all the athletes was strong right from the start, but you could tell whenever a Canadian racer was going by as the crowd would roar with support. Kyle Barber would not find the podium, but PEI's Mark Arends would grab second place. Arends set a record for winning the most medals by a Winter Paralympian in one Games in Pyeongchang, with his first Paralympic gold, 2 silvers, and 3 bronze. And after finally getting the races underway here in Prince George, Arends spoke about how he felt after his first race.
A little bit of nerves going into the first race, and so now that's kind of settled in. I was happy with the race overall, little things here and there, and I think the body really needed this one last intensity before I can really hit the top gears that I know I'm capable of. And
that would be the only podium finishes for Canada on the day, but both Emily Young and Brittany Hudak gave strong showings in their races. Emily is truly competing on home soil as she is from Kelowna, and Brittany is from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. They both spoke about the support of the fans and what it means to be competing here in Canada.
My husband's here, my parents are here, we have a lot of family members from our team here. All the Westerners have come up, and even all the volunteers, they know all the Canadians, and they are so great. They're everywhere on the course, so it gives you a little bit of a boost when you're feeling pretty in the hurt locker up in the top of the hills, so it's great.
The fact that we have a World Championships in Canada is absolutely unreal, and having familiar faces in the crowd and everywhere on the course, it was like someone was always cheering for us. So many Go Canada Go and everybody yelling your name, so it really helps a lot.
The competition being here in Canada allows a lot of the athletes' families to be able to cheer on their loved ones in person, just as Emily Young's family is doing. As for who gets more nervous during the race, well,
I don't know. When she's off racing in Europe and I'm up at 2 in the morning watching the results coming in on live stream, I think it's probably me.
And watching biathlon.
Oh man, I hold my breath for the entire series of shots.
Wildlife continued to make headlines as February came to a close with various moose sightings around the city. One in particular gained a lot of attention for his appearance on a roof. Sandeep Bahal took this video outside her window late February. It was around 12:30 in the morning. She witnessed a moose on top of her carport. She shared the video as a caution to others who had been encountering moose in the area after a mom and 2 calves were spotted regularly nearby. It left one question though, just how did the moose get up there? Well, that certainly gives a new definition to the term roof racks. When we return, we'll work our way through the spring and summer months, which saw one Prince George resident be awarded with a Medal of Bravery and a contentious meeting on the use of the backcountry. Welcome back. March 26th, 2019, a memorable day for one Prince George woman who received one of Canada's highest honors. Chelsea Sabby received the Medal of Bravery for her efforts in stopping an attempted kidnapper, all while with her daycare class.
I had no choice but to hurt him and get him on the ground. There was no way I was letting him get away with one of the children.
Into April now, which saw a close election race for the Lheidli T'enneh Chief and Council. And for the first time in 15 years, a new face elected.
This is the new Chief and Council for the Lheidli T'enneh. Chief Clay Pountney pinpointed economic development within the territory as one priority and working with industry for the benefit of the community. But he also cited some other goals.
Transparency to community. So a lot of communication has kind of gotten stifled, and even between chief and council. So I think we have to work closer together for transparency and communication between ourselves and membership.
He says the latest treaty discussions and the subsequent vote have divided the community, something the new chief and council want to overcome.
That's leadership's job. We have to do that for sure. It's still pretty fresh. And I know since it kind of tore apart the community a little bit, we have to get the community together and see where we want to go from here.
I ran my campaign on the local...
This is Joshua Seymour's second 2-year term, though not back-to-back. He says he campaigned on education for Lheidli T'enneh youth.
You need education to survive in this world today, and if we can combine that with culture, because so many of our students spend so many times at the schools, it'd be good to have that culture shared within the school system because they're there for so long, and it would just make it more accessible. I'm always about access, so if the children can access culture through programs within their schools, I feel that that'll connect them back to their homes and who they are.
Seymour says youth in any community are part of rebridging the gaps that have developed.
The reason why we do these agreements and build these partnerships is so that the youth have a better future and have better access to the future. So if we can build partnerships now, those partnerships will only grow and become more fruitful the older the youth gets. So we're leaving something behind more than we've had so that they have a better shot at a brighter future.
Pountney thanked Dominic Frederick for his work since becoming chief back in 2004 with things like the establishment of the House of Ancestors and the Economic Development Office downtown. And in this time of reconciliation, there are more opportunities than ever.
With the governments changing and with UNDRIP being brought in, I think it's easier for First Nations like ourselves to work with government. So it's easier to reach out and have that level-to-level government going on. So we can actually negotiate and make agreements easier than you could 10 years ago.
The Lheidli T'enneh became the first ever First Nation host for a Canada Winter Games. It instilled a sense of pride.
It's great to see a lot of members that actually have moved back from being away for 10 years are saying, Lheidli Tenay stuff is everywhere. You'll see the signs up like "Welcome to our traditional territory," and it makes everybody very proud, and we're going to keep that going.
Helen Bouzas is a first-time councillor. Clarence John is back for a second term, while Darlene Logan is the longest serving with 3 terms under her belt.
Controversy arose mid-April as hundreds of people across the province attended meetings on the caribou recovery plans. Now, some feel that those plans will negatively impact the industry.
Hundreds turned out to a public consultation meeting on April 10th in Prince George. Those in attendance were demanding to know if their lifestyles and livelihoods were in jeopardy in the province's bid to save the woodland caribou. And it was just one such meeting. Similar crowds turned out to meetings in Dawson Creek and Williams Lake. Premier John Horgan has since realized these kinds of decisions cannot be made in isolation.
Governments need to anticipate those issues and address them in a way that doesn't lead to the type of animosity, quite frankly, that we've had at public meetings since this issue broke publicly. So I've learned a lesson from that, and as we go forward, we're going to do a better job of making sure that we allow people some time to understand why we're having the conversation.
The community of Dawson Creek has been one of the most vocal with respect to how this public consultation has been rolled out, and that included criticism from former MLA Blair Lekstrom, who Horgan has now brought into the fold.
And Blair's here because I've asked him to be my community liaison for the next 6 weeks as we continue on with the consultation with respect to also our Section 11 agreements, as well as any potential additional challenges that the community feels need to be addressed.
And with somebody like Blair and his knowledge of the Peace River region and his past experience with politics, perhaps he's the right individual to do this.
Mike Morris says his hope is that Lekstrom will realize that a draft agreement for the peace doesn't translate into a plausible agreement for the rest of the province under the Section 11 agreement, which runs from Mackenzie to Nelson. In the meantime, Horgan has extended the public consultation period by a month.
I believe that that's adequate time to get to where we need to be. That's bringing the community back together in unison, focused on the economic well-being of everybody in the region, as well as the viability of the caribou.
But Morris would have liked to have seen several months of consultation.
I think there is a balance out there that we can attain in British Columbia where we can look after the sustainable resource development as well as maintaining the biodiversity that BC is so well known to have.
The BC government has also commissioned an independent regional economic analysis to be completed with input from local government.
In May, we saw a bombshell announcement out of School District 57 here in Prince George as Superintendent of Schools Marilyn Marquise Forster announced her sudden resignation. In a statement, she cited her desire to pursue other opportunities as the reason for her departure. She was on the job just shy of 3 years. They've since named her replacement in Prince George-born Anita Richardson. It was a relatively quiet summer here in Prince George with thankfully very few wildfires affecting our region. In July, though, we did have a huge announcement from the city as a $5.6 billion petrochemical project just might be in Prince George's future.
All of Mayor and Council, as well as others, were on hand for the announcement, a $5.6 billion petrochemical plant to be built in the BCR site south of the wrecking yard. For the likes of Willie Manson and Stinger Welding, this is very good news for the entire contracting community.
It can be a very exciting times. We're hearing not good news out of the forest industry, and a shift, a change to this city is very welcome.
Mayor Lynn Hall was asked to speak after the presentation. He called the announcement and the potential for 1,000 direct jobs, not to mention construction jobs, a game changer for this community.
These are the kinds of announcements that don't come all the time, and so we're very excited about it. And as I say, we still know that they've got a tremendous amount of work to do.
He says the city has tried to facilitate West Coast olefins as best it could.
Is that you want municipal support, and so that's really what started out to be a real discussion and meetings and explanations and presentations about the project, and that started about 6 months ago, as you said.
The company has just started the regulatory process, but still plans to have a final investment decision by the end of 2020. That's exactly the time Willie Manson needs to get ready.
Seems like a lot of years for an investment decision, but for a project of this size, even for myself to make an investment in this city takes a substantial amount of time. So a project of this size to put together with a scope will take a couple of years. They want to do it in 2 years and then build it in 3. I think that is a very aggressive schedule.
West Coast Oil Defence says there is no community west of the Rockies better suited to locate this project than Prince George.
In August, a scary weekend for one Mackenzie family as their 4-year-old boy went missing while berry picking. Thankfully, after a day and a half of searching, he was located.
I'm just glad that he's home and safe. That's it. And I would love him, and I probably wouldn't let him out of my sight again.
This is how George's father, Chris Benoit, imagined his reunion with his 4-year-old while he was still lost. The father and son were reunited hours later. George went missing when he was out picking berries with his mother in the Lion Lake area near Mackenzie, just after noon on Saturday. RCMP and multiple search and rescue teams worked day and night trying to find him. Hundreds of volunteers from Mackenzie also joined the search.
I thank Mackenzie and I thank all the other people that have pitched in to help our son and help us find him.
On Sunday night, 30 hours into the search, he was found.
We had Air 3, our RCMP helicopter was in the air late yesterday afternoon, and it was the helicopter that spotted George and directed a police dog team that was on the ground to George and was able to get to him and essentially rescue him from the brush.
George was found walking around. He was cold, wet, hungry, and dehydrated, but was in relatively healthy condition.
There are no words to describe how exciting it was to hear such wonderful news, especially following 30-plus hours of a 4-year-old lost and wandering around in thick, heavy brush. And certainly to be found safe and sound and relatively in good health is, in my humble opinion, miraculous.
George was then reunited with his parents and was monitored at the Mackenzie Hospital. The town of Mackenzie is thrilled with the outcome.
It's very emotional, but of course they're tears of joy. Our community is overjoyed.
RCMP will continue to stay in touch with George and his family as they move forward and enjoy moments of being together once again.
Coming up next on Year in Review, we move out of the spring and summer months and into the fall. We saw a lot of tough times fall on Prince George workers, from curtailments, job actions, and a major shift to Prince George's longest-standing news organization. Welcome back to CKPG News' Year in Review. September 4th saw tense times and quick thinking as a woman saved a man's life who was being attacked by a black bear at Ferguson Lake.
If it wasn't for Muskett's nose and his dislike for black bears, a man may have not walked away from a bear attack near Ferguson Lake, located in the heart.
Oh, thank you. We saw a bear chasing a man in the water. They were both swimming about 6 feet apart. The man was screaming help over and over and that a bear was chasing him. I decided at that moment to take my dog for a run down the trail to get as close to the man and the bear as we could, because I knew the dog didn't like bears and he would bark and hopefully just distract.
The distraction gave the man enough time to swim away from the attacking bear.
The bear got on top of the person 2 to 3 times, and the victim of the bear attack had swam to the dock, which was a considerable swim across the lake, and the bear ran off into the bush with the dog.
According to Conservation Officer Service, the man received minor injuries from the attack.
We then set some traps. We did euthanize a bear early this morning that was showing very high levels of that's consistent with habituated behavior in the immediate area of yesterday's attack.
Before the attack, the CO service had plans in the works to write tickets to those who fail to meet the Wildlife Act.
I'm glad we could help and we were there at the right time. I did what I hope any other person would do in that situation, and yeah, I hope anyone would step up, and it's good to just be bear aware. And
habituated bears and food conditioned bears do pose a higher risk to public safety, and you know, things like this don't have to happen, as numerous as they are nowadays, and it's something that we can change.
Ferguson Lakes Trail System and Park remain closed as officers continue their investigation into the bear attack.
September also saw the loss of the Prince George Daily newspaper as the Citizen moved to a weekly, affecting a certain demographic.
It was a little over 3 years ago the Prince George Citizen reached a milestone, 100 years in the community. At the time, we asked publisher Colleen Sparrow,
next 100 years? Next 100 years, what do we look like? We evolve like any other medium or any other business and industry, right? So we've made some big changes, and there will be more through the next 100 years, but we'll be here.
And change it did. In a letter to its readership, senior management announced that as of October 3rd, it will become a free weekly paper available in neighborhood boxes along with home delivery in certain areas. It will publish its last daily print edition on September 28th. Becoming a weekly is not a decision that was made lightly or quickly, they wrote, but we knew it was a necessary one in order to keep in step with the changing needs, habits, and appetite for readily available quality journalism for local residents. For the lunch crowd at the Elder Citizens Recreation Centre, the news was shocking.
To a lot of them, yes, but a lot of them use the internet now.
And so is that what you're going to do now?
I'm going to have to, because I had the paper from the time we moved here, and that's 53 years, so.
It's a big loss.
It is. I'm going to find it a big loss.
It annoys me because they won't give us a refund.
Does it change your reading habits, how you get your news?
Not yet, but we will.
I don't know. I don't get my crossword every day. Change how you get your news? No, because we get it online. I was absolutely speechless.
Kathy Nodlin has been a columnist with the Prince George Citizen for 7 years.
I read my paper every morning, and I go to my mailbox. First thing, I put the coffee on, and then I go to get my paper, and that's my morning, every morning. I'm going to personally miss it myself, big time. And, you know, I just say be thankful to the Citizen that they're still doing the online thing.
She said she was stunned upon receiving an email from editor Neil Godbout about the changes, which ran down how they will impact the columnists like her.
Those that are already in 9716, which is me, and many others will stay there, and the new one, and then the ones that are in the current Citizen will be moving on over, and that's a good thing, so that because they're all very popular.
The Citizen notes its online site will continue as the hub for daily content, but Nodlin says for many seniors that's a challenge.
I would just like to tell all the seniors you can go to the Prince George Public Library and they'll help you. The tablets are not that expensive these days, and you can really learn to enjoy this. You have to do it, unfortunately.
To date, there is no word on how many staff, if any, will be impacted.
2019 will go down as a year full of industry curtailments as the forestry sector took a major blow. Rallies were held in various communities, including Mackenzie, culminating in a number of logging truck operators driving to downtown Vancouver to protest their opposition to the cutbacks during the annual Union of BC Municipalities meetings.
But there are others impacted, like log haulers, those people who were getting the raw logs to the mills that are now curtailed. They are organizing a convoy from across the province to converge on Vancouver tomorrow at the height of the Union of BC Municipalities convention.
It's widespread. It's right down to the guy flipping burgers at McDonald's to the guy cutting your hair on, the local barber shop, grocery stores, everything. I mean, forest-based communities depend on forestry jobs. Everybody's made their livings and whatnot in our communities, our forest-based communities.
Al Idians says the impacts of curtailments on indirect jobs are almost immediate.
Usually the indirect effect is about almost double, not quite. Depends. In forestry, it has been about double. So one lost job will lead to a second lost job. 100 lost jobs will lead to 200 lost jobs, and so on, roughly.
And the longer it goes on, the worse it gets. It can even impact an entire community.
You have to look at the tax base, because if people are losing their jobs and they're moving away, that reduces the tax base. So if it becomes long term, then you see a a municipality gradually just diminishing its ability to produce parks and education and everything else.
Just last week, Forests Minister Doug Donaldson was in Prince George, recognizing the urgency of the situation.
So our government is making more than $69 million available to implement a new approach to worker, contractor, and community transition.
Canadians says that kind of funding can be something of a crutch.
If the economy can get back into, production in terms of forestry or oil, which is a possibility here, then it's worked. It's covered that transition. And that's where most of us are in that trouble, because most of us can't hold out, for 2 or 3 years or 4 years.
Of the $69 million, $12 million has been set aside for workers to access skills training, with the lion's share of the funds going to retirement packages.
As September came to a close, our newsroom had the opportunity to do a downtown ride-along with Prince George RCMP, opening our own eyes and, in turn, the public's to the plethora of issues that our downtown is home to.
It's 8:30 in the morning on a Thursday in the downtown. The average person rarely sees this side of the downtown. That's because a legion of RCMP officers and bylaw enforcement officers have been busy for the past hour and a half, clearing out known hotspots in the city's core.
I'm just going to see if she's okay. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not hurt or anything?
I'm not what?
You're not hurt or anything?
No.
No.
And it takes an incredible amount of resources.
Our downtown safety unit is comprised of 6 members. Typically there's 1 or 2 away on leave or training and that sort of thing, but today we were lucky we had a full complement on. So yes, we're attempting to get out there every morning early around 7, typically before the businesses open, and try and get things moving.
Superintendent Sean Wright says they've been getting some pressure from downtown businesses and those who work in the downtown. Take the John Howard Society. The staff has personally asked for help.
They've actually come to me personally, to try and get rid of some of these people hanging out here. The staff come and park here. This is where the staff parks, and this is what they come to every morning.
Hello.
Morning. Gonna have to ask you to start moving on. Okay.
The trio moves on without much ado, but what the staff come to every morning is stunning and prevalent. Evidence is still there. The discarded needles and the drug paraphernalia, even human feces, present in the little nooks and crannies, back alleys and vacant lots.
We've received a lot of complaints, as has the city, about from both patrons of that area and business owners of really their day-to-day activities being impeded or disturbed by individuals who have elected to set up camps on private property or occupy areas that aren't public spaces.
I don't have a problem with it. I don't mind walking the back alleys, but people that aren't used to it, it infringes on their day, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it.
Sense of security.
Yeah, sense of security.
Back at the detachment. Do you ever feel personally like you're spinning your wheels a little bit?
No, I wouldn't describe it that way. Society is fluid in nature, and there's always things that are going to carry on. There's been crime since the beginning of time, and there will be until the end. So I view it as we do our part to react to it and make society livable and as safe as we can for the citizens.
Now, October was headlined by the 2019 federal election. The nation went to the voting booth and once again voted in Justin Trudeau, this time his Liberals with a minority government. Right here in our region, the same 2 candidates won their seats back in very convincing fashion.
It was a 4 years experience. It's at 4 years of Justin Trudeau and people seeing that. I don't know. I'm just very thankful for the support of the people.
Well, we ran a tough campaign. We took it seriously. I never take any campaign lightly. Some say we always have it, we're shoo-ins here, but again, that's never a given. So we always work hard.
November was a month of job action, starting with the UNBC faculty, 180 members following through on their strike threat on November 7th. That kicked off a 23-day strike with no classes.
UNBC administration and faculty have been bargaining since March, but still no deal. Earlier this morning, the negotiations came to a standstill.
And at that point, the talks broke off. It was clear that no more progress could be made. And so as of 8 o'clock this morning, we're officially on strike.
We're waiting for the union. We've called them back the last 2 or 3 times, and they were the ones who ended this discussion last night in the wee hours. And we hung around for a couple hours just to make sure that we had exhausted every possibility.
About 180 faculty walked off the job, which affected as many as 3,500 students. Joining the picket lines this morning was support from other unions and a group of UNBC students.
There's a large number of members from the 2 CUPE locals on campus who are supporting our picket line by honoring it, and we're very pleased to see that level of support. And also the members of Unite Here who work in the cafeteria, they've also been notified and they've been leaving their work locations as well this morning.
The majority of the people behind me are we're a mix of grad and undergrad students. We're here marching up in support of the faculty. We're going to be walking up the hill, joining them at the picket line. We have explicit permission from the Faculty Association and the support of the TA Grad Union. And those of us who feel comfortable will be crossing the picket line and going to occupy the administration building to make our voices heard and to make sure that those on the negotiation table on both sides know that we want a fast and respectful solution to the strike right now.
Wages are a key issue in the dispute.
What we're offering to our faculty is to move them significantly. So let me give you some examples. A full professor up to 28% over 3 years of an increase. An associate professor up to 22% over 3 years, and assistant professors up to, and of course they're starting out, so assistant professors up to 18%. So on average, that's a 15% increase over 3 years.
Unfortunately, it isn't just a single issue. There's sort of a constellation of different things, some of it relating to compensation, some of it relating to language in our collective agreement. The administration would really like to restrict some of the rights that we have currently, and we obviously don't agree with that.
Picket lines are expected to be up for 12 hours during the day, starting and ending at 7:30 each day. No word yet from either side when they plan to meet again.
As November got set to shut its doors, so did a historical fixture in Prince George's downtown. On the same day that Lowe's announced it was shuttered, Northern Hardware announced it expects to close in February.
An historical fixture in the downtown will be disappearing. Northern Hardware, or more fondly known as the Northern, is expected to close its doors in February, impacting 30-plus jobs. It was a decision not made lightly, and many factors played a role in it.
You know, retail in general is changing, and the online presence just keeps getting stronger and stronger. Prince George is growing and has, and a lot of the big box stores. Lowe's coming in, actually, ironically, it did steal a lot of our business. Weather is a big one. I never realized how much weather drives a business. The changes in downtown definitely are part of the reason.
Kelly Moffat remembers riding her tricycle down the aisles as a kid. She is the 4th generation Moffat to run the operation, but there are many others like Marilyn Hall who have great memories of the Northern.
I immediately think about a few things. The loss of jobs, family-owned business, the loss of a little bit of history or a lot of history in our community. We talked a little bit about how the Northern is an anchor store to our downtown, just like Sears and perhaps Zellers and Bays and those kinds of things are anchor stores. Well, the Northern was an anchor store to our downtown.
Hall says he remembers bringing his children to the store to ride the mechanical horse for a dime, and it is still a dime. But he says personally it has been a very tough day. First hearing about the closure of Lowe's and more than 100 jobs, and now the Northern. But for downtown Prince George, the organization, it is the loss of an anchor store.
an icon business that is celebrating 100 years in this community. And we've all got some stories to tell about the Northern and shopping there and socializing there and making it part of our daily routines. So this is hard to hear for downtown Prince George.
And the flagship store on 3rd Avenue is not the only operation impacted.
So about a year and a half ago, we liquidated our appliances, and AMCO is our wholesale division. AMCO stands for Alexander Moffat Company. So that is our wholesale, and it is actually a very thriving business, but it can't survive without a buying group like Home Hardware. So the decision was made to just close all 3, and all 3 buildings will be for sale.
But rather than mourn the loss of the Northern, Kelly Moffat says she would rather celebrate a 100-year history in the community.
Into December now, where after a lengthy process, we saw the sentencing of former Burns Lake Mayor Luke Strimbold in BC Supreme Court in Smithers. Strimbold will face 2 years less a day jail time after being charged with 4 counts of sexual assault. All of the charges against Strimbold involved boys under the age of 16, with 2 of them believed to have occurred during his time as mayor. Strimbold was once the youngest mayor in BC at just 21 years old. When we return to our year in review, we'll take a look back at the sports scene here in Prince George over the last year, where we had some major firsts to celebrate. Stay with us. Welcome back to CKPG News' Year in Review. Now that the news side of things is all wrapped up, let's turn our attention to the sports. Certainly a lot to celebrate this year, especially if you were a fan or became a fan of the Spruce Kings.
Into the zone. 5 seconds to go. The Prince George Spruce Kings are your Fred Page Cup champions in 2019.
First, they went on a historic 16-1 run in the playoffs. That included 3 series sweeps, culminating with a 4-0 series win over the Vernon Vipers to claim their first ever Fred Page Cup. But the Kings didn't stop there. Their next opponent was the Brooks Bandits, the CJHL's best team for most of the season. In a best-of-4 series with the odds stacked against them, the Kings managed to bring home the Doyle Cup on home ice in just 6 games. With 2 cups to their name, the Spruce Kings then made their way back to Brooks for just their second franchise appearance at the National Junior A Championship. After a 3-1 round robin and a win in the semifinals, the miracle run from the Prince George team fell just short, losing 4-3 in the national championship game to who else but the Brooks Bandits.
It's an incredible group. It'll be hard to duplicate this group, to be honest.
The successful season was capped off when 2 of the Kings' graduating players in Leighton Ahak and Logan Neaton heard their names called in the NHL draft. After the culmination of the club's historic season, the Spruce Kings had some big shoes to fill. Head coach Adam Maglio made the step to the WHL in the offseason, becoming the associate coach for the Spokane Chiefs. The Kings went with associate coach Alex Even to take over for Mags, tasked this year with a much younger Spruce Kings club, looking to come together as a team. Now for the Cougars, 2019 wasn't a year they'll want to remember. Entering into the new year, they fell victim to a 17-game losing streak. Mid-slide, they fired head coach Richard Mapachuk.
I've been evaluating everything, all aspects since I got to Prince George. And
the team's new GM, Mark Lamb, stepped into the coaching role. Though the team's season didn't look up much more, change was brewing in the room. After Cole Moberg became the 3rd Prince George-based hockey player to get drafted into the NHL in June, focus shifted to the coaching staff. On July 4th, GM Mark Lamb was named the team's head coach. 2 weeks later, former Edmonton Oiler and former head coach of the Kelowna Rockets, Jason Smith, got a phone call as well. Smith joined the Cougars as a co-head coach, assisting Lamb on the defensive side of the ice. The Cougars kicked off their 2019 campaign with a preseason trip to Dawson Creek, marking the WHL's first game in the community. Since then, the team has strived to improve upon their record from last year, but still is fighting its way out of the bottom of the BC division. Now up the hill at the university, the UNBC Timberwolves continued to see all 4 of their teams make huge strides in 2019.
No good, rims out, and that'll do it.
Through February, the women's basketball team won a thrilling playoff game against the Trinity Western Spartans, marking their first postseason win in program history. The men's team also cracked the playoffs again, but lost in the first round to the UFB Cascades. As for their soccer teams, both teams battled for playoff position this season, with the men missing the mark, but the women's team once again earning a spot in the postseason. A tough 2-1 loss to the University of Manitoba on a windy day in Calgary wrapped up their season. So certainly lots to celebrate as we look back at everything 2019 held and look forward to 2020, the start of a new decade here in the city. Thank you so much for joining us for CKPG News' Year in Review. For myself and everyone else at the Jim Pattison Broadcast Group, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Thanks for watching.